is it going to be maintainable in the long run? So that. My name is Olivier Gaudin. I'm one of the co-founders of SonarSource. And SonarSource is the company that develops the open source platform Sonar to test quality of source code. Just out of interest, who uses Sonar already here? Okay, who has never heard of Sonar? So quite a few people. What I'm going to talk about really today is, first I'm going to talk about industrialization of development, then I'm going to talk about the 7 deadly sins, and then I will do quite a long demo of Sonar to show how you can continuously inspect your source code with Sonar. So that's when I started to do development about 15 years ago. Development world was really a world of cowboys, adventurers. Basically, there were very little processes. Everybody was more or less developing or debugging in production. The more you were changing job, the more things you were seeing, the better developer you were. Those adventurers, they were of several types. Some of them were geniuses. So basically, those guys, when they talk to you about something, you don't really understand what they are talking about, but you trust that they are very clever. Some of them were superheroes. So those are the ones that you basically call when you don't know how to sort out an issue. So those guys are generally people who stay very, very long in organization, who know exactly why things have been built this way. And another type is the type of people who consider the software they develop as their jobs. So those guys always very happy to discuss with other people about interfaces, but not always so happy to discuss implementation. So adventurers are not mad people. So at some point in time, when you start to see that you cannot make change to software, whenever you make a change, it has, you change a button from red to blue and it breaks an important business process. After a while, if you don't monitor, if you don't manage your quality, basically what's going to happen, everybody is going to be very scared of making changes. Your organization is going to become very, very rigid, and you are going to start to put a lot of testing prior to going to production, and basically your agility is going to decrease. So since 10 years, there was a huge change in software development about industrialization. I mean, we have seen, it might look very surprising to you, but 15 years ago, having a source controller in an organization was not so common. Everybody was developing on its C drive, sometimes on the network to have the backup. But nowadays, since 10 years, it has really become a standard. The second big thing that happened is continuous integration. Does anybody don't know what continuous integration is? Don't know. Okay, everybody knows. So that's one of the most important things that happened in the last 10 years. It's really about getting quick feedback. Does it build, does it not build? It's about saving time, it's about saving money, it's about saving precious energy of developers, rather than trying to debug to understand why what they just pulled out from the repository doesn't work. They can spend their time developing functionality. And the last thing in industrialization that happened is really the traceability, with basically knowing, okay, tomorrow we are going to release version 2.0, but what's 2.0? What's going there? What's the list of functionality, or maybe technical changes we are making? Also in the last 10 years, I should say 15 years, there was a huge change in the tooling. 15 years ago, when you were developing in Java, you were using VI. If you were very, very lucky, you were using Emacs. It has changed a lot. Today, you use very powerful IDEs. that can do refactoring for you, that are going to execute the unit test whenever you compile. So there was a very big evolution in that. The next big thing, obviously, from our opinion, is going to be continuous inspection. Now, what's the mission of today's developer? I think that's a big change compared to the cowboys that were 15 years ago. Today, we really expect people to, instead of only, if I can say so, doing the right software, i.e. the software that's going to respond to the business needs, and that's going to be validated by acceptance test, as John showed before. You also want your software to be right, which is you want your software to be of quality, it should be maintainable, it should be easy to change, it should be evolutive, and that today is not the case everywhere. You want that people develop for others, you want to use methodologies. I'm sure you are all familiar with TDDs. TDD is a methodology. It provides you, the first thing it provides you is kind of a safety net for changing your functionality later on. But the second thing it provides you is also to have a much more linear development throughout time. Basically, when you are finished with your development, you don't have like basic functionality which don't work. Because you do TDD, because you do automated integration test, you are going to be able to avoid this period at the end of iteration, whereby you have no idea when it's going to work and you have to debug. The last thing that happened since a couple of years, I would say, not everywhere yet, is transparency. For a very long time, the developers, they were developing, on not really communicating on where they are, on when they communicate, it's very vague, you don't really know what's happening. Today, with tools like Jenkins, with tools like Jira, with tools like Sonar, you know exactly where you stand on your application, whether it's functionally, whether it's in terms of test on what has been developed, or whether it's in terms of internal quality. So basically, this transparency is one of the things that happened is that source code has become very, very important. 15 years ago, everything was about design. Everybody was talking about design. My manager told me, maybe not every day, but at least every week, if we get the design right, the application is going to be fine, it's going to be maintainable, we will have no issue. Whoever is going to code doesn't really matter. That, we have come a long way with that. I think there were a lot of things that happened. One of them is obviously maturity of a development team, which made that people now realize that you need to get your source code right if you want your application to be evolutive and maintainable. Right. And you want that because the maintenance for an organization that develops software is the thing that is going to cost the most on the software. Developing the software is going to be one thing. Generally in the industry we say that the cost of a software is about 80% in maintenance. I think with agile methodology, agile teams today, it's more than 80%. It's probably not far from 100% because you do 1, 2, 3 iterations and then you start to have to do maintenance. You get feedback, you need to change something, you start doing maintenance. Some of it is going to be new, but a lot of it is going to be maintaining what you have already written. When we talk about internal quality, it's quite difficult to find a good definition because very often we talk about metrics. And whenever you talk about metrics, metrics are most of the time, I would say, evil. Because when you talk about metrics, there are always corner cases, there are always cases where the metric is not going to apply. You talk about size of the program, you talk about complexity of the program, you talk about number of violations. There are times where those metrics are not going to be relevant, and you need to go beyond the metrics. So one of the Best definition we found for quality is this one. And if you take it the other way around, it means that if you have a software on which you make evolution, on if it costs you today, let's say 10 days to implement a functionality, if your code has a bad quality, in 1 year or 2 years' time, it's going to cost you more, or probably much more than 10 days. So the worse you wait to implement a functionality in a bad quality software, the longer it's going to take. And that's what we are trying to fight back with continuous inspection. Now, how do you measure quality? So the first way is, I would say, very manual. And it's the most basic. Basically, you look at how happy the team is when they do changes in the application. So here on the left, looks like a pretty good application. On the right, not so good application. Now, sorry. What you actually do when you want to measure quality is you tend to measure non-quality. You tend to measure what we call technical debt. I'm sure you have heard about that. It's a concept introduced by Agile, and basically, there is an analogy which is made with financial debt. Whenever you want to buy a big asset, like maybe a car, maybe an apartment, generally what you need to do is you need to go to the bank to do a mortgage, because if you wait to have all the money, basically you are going to wait until you are 60 years old or maybe 70 years old. Now, it's the same for software development. I mean, it's the same. There is an analogy for software development whereby you say, if you wait to have perfect quality in your application, you are going to wait so long that you are never going to put into production. Now, like for a financial mortgage, it's fine to get a debt. The whole thing is you need to be careful not to get a too big of a debt, basically. If you get a too big of a debt, you are going to get bankrupt at that point, which means basically in software development, you are going to have to rewrite the software. Because if you push something into production that is too much in a debt, every time you will want to make a change, it's going to cost a lot, it's going to have side effects, and after a while, the business on the other side is going to say, okay, let's buy a package, another product, or let's rebuild the product. And that costs the most. Right. This debt is made of sins, what we call the 7 deadly sins of the developer. Do you know what those sins are? They are not real sins, they are developer sins. Any idea of what they are? Nobody? Maybe I have one on my t-shirt, indeed. So the first one is it's about coding standards. You should follow certain coding standards, and there are two. I'll explain on the next slide. Any other idea about those things? Mm-hmm. Code style. Okay, but that's part of the coding standard, I think. Okay. Sorry. Forget about tests, you said? Yeah, not sufficient testing, not sufficient unit tests is another one. There are 7, no?
Maybe code without comments.
Documentation is another one, definitely.
Bad names, very long methods.
Yeah, complexity is another one.
Static methods, for example.
I would put that in coding standards. Copy and paste, fifth one.
What about over engineering?
That's very difficult to measure. But
different complexity usually show you that.
yeah, but complexity we said already. Another one is about design. So what we call spaghetti design. So if you start to have things like package A talks to package B, which talks to package C, which talks to package A again, then you start to be in trouble.
Also some kind of antiparadox.
Yeah, that's part of coding standards. Coding standards is very large. And the last one is potential bugs. So those are the 7 deadly sins. I will quickly go through them just to explain why they are bad. So the worst one is definitely duplication, because when you copy-paste, the worst one, maintainability-wise, is definitely duplicated code. Why? Because when you duplicate code, you have to maintain it twice, you have twice as many bugs, you have twice as many of the 6 other things, basically. So that's definitely the worst one. But when you come to look at an application or you do some code review on it, the first one is probably not the one you are going to fix immediately. Why? Because if you start to remove duplications from an application, what's going to happen is you might break something, because it looked like it was exactly duplication, but maybe there was a slight change somewhere. So the very first thing you should probably look at is unit test, the fourth one on this page. You should look at increasing unit test before you basically make any other changes. Otherwise, you are taking risks. Complexity. Why don't you want to have too much complexity in methods or in classes? Because it becomes difficult to read. You have a lot of you are going to have to do a lot of efforts to understand the method as a whole. We are not superhumans. We have a limited amount of memory, so we should try to split them. And the golden rule for that is there are no too small of a method or too small of a class. Spaghetti design, I think it's pretty obvious. So one thing on this one is everybody thinks, okay, I'm good at designing, I'm not going to do cycle dependencies. That's true, we are all good at designing, and we are never going to do cycle dependencies when we write an application initially. But what happens is there is erosion when you continue to develop software. You start to make small changes here and there, and suddenly you don't realize that you start to have cycle dependencies. In Sonar, if you look at, you can look at Sonar on our Nemo website. We have cycle dependencies. We are people who are very, very careful about this. Why do we have cycle dependencies? Because at some point in time, we wrote APIs to be able to write plugins on the platform, and we changed them, we adjusted them, and then we got cycle dependencies. We had no tool to look at that. And once you have cycle dependencies in your APIs, you cannot remove them. If you remove them, you lose backward compatibility. So now it's forever. Lack of coding standards, it's style, and it's also best practices. Like if you redefine equals, you should also redefine hash code. These kind of practices. Potential bugs, we look for null pointer exception, we look for unsafe threads, things like that. On the last one, it's the most controversial one, it's about documentation and comments. Some people ask for 20% of documentation. We at SonarSource, we don't think it's a very good. I mean, I'm not making a judgment, but we don't look at this kind of method. What we want, as a minimum internally, we want that all public APIs have Javadoc. That's the bare minimum. So now I'm going to switch to Sonar. And I'm going to try to explain through the demo the difference between doing code review, audit, and doing continuous inspection, and why do we think the only way to improve code is really to do continuous inspection. So that, for those who have never seen Sonar before, that's what a typical dashboard looks like in Sonar. You have a lot of figures there, a lot of numbers. You know, you are going to find all the scenes here, duplication, commands, complexity. You are going to find violations, which handle both potential bugs and coding standards. Here we see some historical data, code coverage by unit test, and there is also here a section about design. So basically, in Sonar, you analyze your project and you get this kind of dashboard. You can customize it if you wish to. And then you have the ability to click on any of those numbers, because it's cool to have averages, numbers, but you need to understand what's behind. If I tell you, you know, on complexity, it's 1.8 point of complexity per method, it doesn't really mean much, because it could be that all your methods are 1 and there are a few that have 2, but it could also, most of your methods are 1, but there could be a few that have 2, but it could also, which would be perfect, but it could also mean that out of 100 methods, you have 98 that have 1 of complexity, and you have 2 that have 800. And in that case, you would really need to do something about the 800. So those figures, very nice, but then whatever you see here, okay, whatever you see here, you are able to click on, and you get a breakdown. So there are 756 lines duplicated in Sonar. I'm able to see that there are almost 200 in the plugin API module. There are 154 in utils command package, and then I get the source code, the blocks of duplication. I can expand it. I see what is duplicated with what. So I always have the ability to get to the source code. It's exactly the same for violations. For violations, when you click on the number of violations, you get a distribution by severity, you get a distribution by rules, and you get again a distribution by modules, packages, and files. And if you click on the file, you see the source code, and here you know who is the last committer on the line. You know you have the rule. You have the severity, so you see the violation in context. So everything we show comes out of the source code, so for whatever we show you, you need to be able to understand where it's coming from and to be able to fix it. So once we had built that, and that's a typical code review tool. You know, I'm sure you have used Checkstyle, PMD. You get similar information. You are able to see the source code. You are able to match back to the source code, but that's not sufficient. You also need historical data, because those informations, they need to be put in context. Maybe you saw that Sonar has coverage by unit test of something like 69%, which is good. But if I tell you that our requirement for coverage is 70, if I only tell you that, what you will tell me is you are not matching, you are not meeting your requirements, and you will be right. Now, if I tell you that 3 months ago we were at 50%, then you will say, okay, you came a long way, you have almost achieved the requirements, so just keep going. If I tell you that 3 months ago it was 85%, then you are going to tell me you have a big issue that you need to fix immediately. So it's very important that as part of whatever you are looking at in Sonar, you get and you look at historical data. Where are you coming from? And basically try to guess where you are going to. So once we had built that, we really thought that was it, and we had a very nice code review tool and we could start to really use it. And we started to use it internally at SonarSource, and we said, okay, now let's define our rules. What are the rules to go to production? We do, we do a release every 6 to 8 weeks of Sonar. So we started to say, okay, before we go to production, we should do a QA, we should do a review of the internal quality, and we should decide whether the software has a sufficient quality for us to let it pass. So the first thing we said is we should have no blocker critical violation, and then we said every release the number of violations should decrease, and we should actually at some point come to 0. We tried that, and we could never succeed in that. We could never succeed because there are always some very good reasons, and I'm not saying it's not true. It's really true. There are always some very good reasons why some violations you cannot fix them. Some of them, if you fix them, for example, the one on the API, if we fix them, we lose backward compatibility. Do we want to do that? No, we don't want to do that. So this one, we should keep it. And there are always good reasons. That's the first thing. And the second thing is, that's possible on a new project. You can have a target of 0, but on a legacy project, which is 90-something% of the project, you won't be able to fix whatever was done in the past. You have to move on. You have to look forward. So basically, the next functionality that was very obvious for us internally to start using Sonar with proper rules, with real rules that we follow every time, was what we call the differential views. The differential views are the ability to define a baseline you want to compare to. And at SonarSource, what we say is whatever went to production last time is fine. We accepted it went to production, so that's our baseline, and now we are going to monitor what we are developing now. So basically, you can define a date, you can define a version, you can define a period. You can say I want to have a look at what happened for the last 7 days, 30 days, whatever. What we really use internally is this one, which is it's since previous version. We are currently developing version 3.4 of Sonar. By the way, I forgot to tell you it's Sonar on Sonar. I'm sure you guessed. So basically, we want to compare where we are at the moment with where we were when we went last time to production, so version 3.3. And now you see exactly the same numbers, except that in brackets you get what we call a differential value. So basically, we know that there is an additional 311 rules. We can see here that there is an additional 13 violations, which is very bad. And moreover, we don't only say that there is plus 13, we tell you that 35 have been added and 22 have been removed, which is very important because in that direction it's okay. It's plus 13, so it's bad, so we are going to ask people to do something about it. But let's imagine that I have minus 50 here. If you don't have more information than that, you will say minus 50 violation is very good. But if I tell you that it's actually minus 100 plus 50, it's not as good, because it means that maybe some people in the team, they didn't have the training on improving quality, or they don't really care about improving quality. So you should really look at this number here, which is the number of added violations. And when you click on here, you get exactly the same drill down as I showed you before, and you get to see where it was added and probably who added it. That's an optional functionality to see who added it. At the same time, we provided this information for what was added and what was removed. We also did exactly the same kind of feature on the code coverage by unit test, because very interesting is when you start to do TDD, what very often happens is that on legacy application, people tend to say we can't really do TDD because we have 500,000 lines in the application. There are no unit tests. If we start to write unit tests to reach our objective, which is 40, 50, 60%, it's going to take a year. And also just writing unit tests on existing code is not a lot of fun. So what we provide here is we basically provide the same metrics as code coverage, but on the code that was changed or added. So basically you can start to define a threshold that you want to meet. What's your objective? Let's say 50%. On new application, it must be 50% overall. On legacy application, it should be 50% on what was changed. That enables to, when you want to do TDD, that on every single application you apply the same threshold. So basically, with all this, we thought again internally that we could define some rules. On the new rules we wanted to apply was no new validation. We don't want a single new validation when we go to production. Now, we really thought it would work, but it didn't. And why it didn't? Because sometimes you want to add violations. Very simple example is about a year ago, we rewrote the engine that enables to find duplications. And we rewrote it on, we knew it was very good, much better, but we knew that in some corner cases, it didn't work. Like there were in some certain application, we were getting issues with memory, infinite loops, etc., etc. But we had something which was good already. So when we released it, we packaged it, and when we packaged it, obviously, simple thing was to copy-paste the existing code to integrate it. So when we went when we stopped developing this version of Sonar, there was a new 1,000 lines of duplications, which were because of this new duplication way of finding duplication. So basically, we had the choice between we fix it, which means that we extract the code, the common code, we refactor it, or we do inheritance, or whatever, or we just leave it because we know that the old module is going to be removed in 3, 6 months, whatever. And in that case, I mean, we are not. We don't want to do quality for quality. It's not for the beauty of it. It's because it's bringing something. So in that case, you don't want to remove it. I mean, we made the choice to leave it. But if we leave it, what happens is this number has grown. On this number, we have a lot of internal rules about trying to control it. So basically, what we did is on this we have added on the violation, we have added the ability to take ownership of a violation. So here you can comment a violation, you can assign it to somebody, you can make it false positive if the tool got it wrong, which happens, and you can assign it to a plan. Basically, we use three plans. So plans are buckets of violation. We have the fix now in the current iteration. We have the bucket for the issues that we are going to fix in the next iteration, and we have what we call the long-term plan. And the long-term plan is generally things we are not going to fix. So now we have the ability to add those violations into the long-term plan, which means that when we look now, when we want to know how we stand in terms of quality, is it going to be releasable? We look at this dashboard on here. Yeah, that's exactly it. On here, for example, we don't want a single violation which is not reviewed. So basically, we take our violations, our technical debt under control. Now, from that, what you can do in your project is you can subscribe by email to new violation. So whenever you do some coding, you can say, I want to be notified when a new violation is added on my module, on my project, which means that you are going to get very quickly feedback, and you don't wait until QA time comes where the release manager says, I can't do it. The other thing I'm not going to show now, but that exists, is an Eclipse plugin, which is not, it's okay at the moment, but the next version is going to be much, much better. So basically, in the next version, you are going to be able to run a complete sonar analysis in your IDE. For a huge project, it's going to be might be a bit long, so we will need to work on the ability to do a differential analysis, so only analyzing what changed. But for normal project, it's very useful. I mean, it means that before you commit, you have the ability to know if you have added some technical debt to your project, and it basically avoids that the next day you get an email. It's always much better to work on a violation when it's fresh, rather than 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks later, or 3 months later, and have to do some changes. So that's really what we call continuous inspection. The ability to see where you stand in an application, to see where you are coming from. It's normal code review functionality, I would say. But then you have the ability to know when a violation was introduced, to be notified when a violation is introduced, and to run an analysis to know where you stand before you are going to make your change. Just one thing is, Sonar is a tool, only a tool. It's not, I mean, analyzing software in Sonar doesn't mean that it's under quality control. It's exactly the same as using Jenkins or Hudson to do continuous integration. If nobody looks at the results, you are not really doing continuous integration. Continuous integration or continuous inspection is the process that you put on top of the tool. So you should train the new joiners, you should explain the rules, you should change the rules when they don't apply, you should adjust them. You should look at everything which is reported. On that's my final slide. The objective is really that whenever you go to production, I'm not saying you will not add to technical debt. What I'm saying is that the technical debt you add, you have or not added to your software, you know about it, it's controlled, and you know what you are going to do about it or not do. That's it. Do you have any question?
I have a question. Do you plan to write a plugin for IntelliJ IKEA?
Yes.
Because now that doesn't work.
Absolutely. But the issue we had so far is that when we wrote the Eclipse plugin, it was really just, we basically took whatever was required for an analysis, we embedded it into a big plugin, Eclipse plugin, and then we were running it. So, and then on top of that, we were doing integration with Eclipse. We knew from the beginning that would not be the way to go. We need to do exactly like for normal analysis, we need to download whatever is required from the server, etc., etc. So now we have done this. We are done actually with the Eclipse plugin for this. It's not released because we need 3.4. And from there we have now a library that we can use and reproduce the integration into IntelliJ. The next step for us is IntelliJ Visual Studio also.
Do you have some timeline for this?
IntelliJ, no, but I mean first part of next year. I'm fairly confident about that.
One more question.
And by the way, the big difference now is that anybody who will want to write the IntelliJ plugin is going to have just to integrate what we call the Sonar Analyzer in dry run mode. Before, you had to do everything. You know, you had to talk almost to the Sonar database to be able to do that. So I expect that we can get contribution because quite a few people are asking about that.
Thank you. And one more question. Our project currently having problems with running test coverage for Java 7 because Cobertura does not support Java 7. Emma also does not support, and JCOPL supports very limited style. If you use some very enhanced modding techniques like Gmod, JCOPL also does not support. Do you have some advice? How can we correct?
I think I forgot to mention that I'm not the most technical person at Solar Source. So I cannot understand that. I cannot answer that, sorry. But are you sure JCOPL doesn't support Java 7?
It does, but it plays with ClassLoader, and if you use
Okay.
Mocket Engine to also play with ClassLoader, they clash together,
Yeah.
it just don't work.
Yeah, like for Aspect 4G.
Yeah.
Okay, that you need to submit on the mailing list. Yeah.
Is it possible to use your products to inspect C# projects or other languages, like F# or something?
Yes, there are 20 languages supported. C#, VB.NET, C, C++, COBOL, JavaScript, PHP.
For me it's enough.
Okay, I stop them. Yeah,
Can you open the Sonar dashboard, please?
I can.
I have a question about complexity section.
Yeah.
Here we have values 9.5 per class. What does it mean? Do you have such kind of help page to understand what value is good and what value is bad? What should it be? What is total 1200?
Okay. Cyclomatic complexity, which is what we report here, is basically you're more or less looking at the number of branches in your program. So every time you have an if, every time you have a while, etc., every time you have the program has to make a decision, it counts +1. Now, for a method, typically, there is no rule. I mean, there is not the magic value, but typically for methods, you would a maximum would be anything between 7 and 12. For classes, I would say it depends. But what's important here is, if you have a class that is more than 90, you want to know what those classes are. Here, the ones that are above 90. And for that, you can use violations. You want to know what they are. You want to make sure it's in control. You don't have somebody who is writing 3,000 lines classes, basically. Yeah?
Sonar is a great tool. Any plan for writing Xcode and Objective-C Sabbath?
Real plans, no.
Why?
But why? Because it's first, there is not so much demand on it. And the second is parsing Objective-C is as difficult as parsing C++. And we have almost just completed a C++ parser. Probably the next step on this domain is going to be Objective-C, but I would expect there are a couple of things we do before. Whenever we cover a new language, it's fairly easy to cover a new language. Like we have just added C++, but if you look at C++, we have only 30 or 40 rules, and it's not sufficient. So we need to make sure that when we develop a new language, it has sufficient rules. And we have a limited bandwidth, so it's one by one, basically. But there is also some demand on Android. Android Objective-C, there is some demand. Yeah?
For violations, we have added and removed, and for the applications, we can see the files, new files where the applications added.
It's true. We could obviously do it. We have the information, but I think the dashboard is fairly, there are quite a few numbers already. Would it bring really so much value quality-wise? I mean, it's interesting information about the size of the variation on the application, but we try to show a method, a number only if it brings value in terms of quality. Knowing how many files you added or removed is not really a quality metric. It's not a qualitative metric, I would say. So we do it for violations because violations are definitely qualitative. That did not answer your question.
I try to say that it will be helpful to see that to have ability to click new applications and see what files add these applications to remove it faster, and not inspect the whole 40 or 50 files to see what new added.
Yes, but I think my point was, would that help you to understand the quality of your application?
It will help me to improve the quality.
Why? How?
I will see that, we on new code add this wrong things, and I needed to fix it as soon as possible.
Okay, but I think what you are talking about is some kind of code review tool, but it would be a tool like Crucible or maybe Gerrit that provides you this information about the commit information, what has been added, what has been removed, basically. Here we try to focus really on code quality.
Yeah, understand.
Any other question? That's it then. Thank you.